It was a quiet evening, the kind that made the whole town feel sleepy. The small karate dojo on the corner of Maple Street was almost empty, except for the sound of students practicing. The wooden floor creaked as bare feet moved in rhythm. The instructor, Master Kenji, stood with his arms crossed, watching every movement with sharp eyes. The students respected him. No one dared to make a mistake under his gaze. But that night, something unusual happened. The door creaked open slowly, and everyone turned their heads. A man stood there, tall but thin, his shoulders slouched under an old torn coat. His hair was messy, his beard rough, and his face looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept well in days. His shoes were broken, his jeans dirty. A strange smell followed him, the kind that made a few students wrinkle their noses. For a moment, no one said anything. The air went still. Then one of the younger boys whispered, "Who's that?" Another laughed quietly and said, "Probably a beggar." The sound of small giggles spread across the room. The man didn't seem to notice. His eyes moved across the dojo, from the hanging calligraphy on the wall to the wooden boards stacked in the corner, then to the students lined in rows. His expression was calm, even gentle, as if he had seen places like this before. Master Kenji walked forward, his face serious. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was polite but distant, like he wasn't sure if this stranger belonged here. The man nodded slowly. I just wanted to watch," he said in a soft voice. "If that's okay." His tone was humble, not demanding. There was no anger, no pride, just a quiet request. The students looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or feel sorry. One of them whispered, "He wants to watch karate? In those clothes?" Another chuckled. "Maybe he thinks this is a movie." But Master Kenji didn't laugh. He stared at the man for a few seconds, then gave a small nod. "You can sit there," he said, pointing to a wooden bench at the back. "Thank you," the man whispered. He bowed slightly, not awkwardly, but with surprising grace. Then he walked to the bench, each step slow and careful, like he didn't want to disturb anyone. As the class continued, the students tried to focus, but their eyes kept wandering toward the stranger. He sat straight, watching every movement, the punches, the kicks, the bowing, the breathing. He wasn't just staring. He was studying. His gaze followed every detail, every mistake, every improvement. There was something strange about the way he looked, not like a curious outsider, but like someone who understood what was happening on a deeper level. Master Kenji noticed. During the water break, two students whispered near the back, "Do you think he's really homeless?" "Yeah," the other said. "Look at his shoes. He probably sleeps under a bridge." The man must have heard them. His lips curved slightly into a small, sad smile. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred, then returned his attention to the class. When practice ended, the students lined up and bowed to the instructor. Master Kenji gave them their usual words of advice, about focus, respect, and discipline. But while he spoke, his eyes kept drifting toward the man in the corner. Something about him didn't feel random. After the class, the dojo slowly emptied. The students packed their bags, chatting and laughing. The man was still sitting quietly, hands resting on his knees. One brave student walked past him and muttered, "You like the show, old man?" The man only smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "It was beautiful." The boy frowned, confused, and walked away. When the last student left, Master Kenji began wiping his hands with a towel. "You've watched the whole class," he said, walking closer. "Do you practice martial arts?" The man looked up, eyes soft but tired. "Once," he said. "A long time ago." Kenji raised an eyebrow. "Where?" The man hesitated. "Here and there. Different places. I had a teacher once, but life changed." There was pain in his voice, not the kind that begged for pity, but the kind that carried memories. Kenji didn't ask more. He could see this man had seen things and hard things. "You can come again," Kenji said after a pause. "As long as you don't disturb the class." The man nodded gratefully. "Thank you," he whispered. "That's very kind." Before he left, he looked at the wooden board stacked by the wall. His fingers twitched slightly as if remembering an old feeling. The rhythm, the power, the focus of striking. Then he looked back at the sensei and smiled faintly. "Your students are strong," he said, "but their hearts are still learning." Master Kenji frowned, surprised by the words. "What do you mean?" he asked. The man only smiled again, his eyes distant. "Maybe one day you'll see." And just like that, he walked out into the cold night, his figure disappearing into the darkness. The sound of the door closing echoed softly behind him. For a long moment, Master Kenji stood there thinking. There was something about that man, something hidden beneath the dirt, the worn clothes, and the silence. Something powerful. He didn't know it yet. But that same man, the one everyone laughed at, would soon do something that would shake the entire dojo and change how everyone saw him forever. The next evening, the dojo was louder than usual. The students arrived early, whispering and laughing about the strange man who had come the night before. Some brought snacks, some stretched on the mat, but all of them talked about him. "Do you think he'll come again?" one asked, half laughing. Another replied, "I hope not." The smell alone was worse than a locker room. A few chuckled, covering their mouths, pretending not to be cruel. But the cruelty was there, hidden behind nervous laughter. Master Kenji walked in, clapping his hands once.
"Line up!"
he shouted. The students quickly straightened. The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the heater, and then the door creaked open, every head turned. The same man stood there, still in his old coat, still tired, still calm. He gave a small bow. "Good evening," he said politely. His voice was soft, almost peaceful. The students exchanged looks. One boy smirked. "He really came back," he whispered. Another added, "Maybe he wants to join. Should we get him a uniform made of garbage bags?" The man heard it. But instead of reacting, he smiled faintly and walked to the same corner as before. He took off his coat, folded it neatly, and sat down cross-legged on the wooden floor. His eyes once again followed every motion, every kick, every strike. Master Kenji noticed his presence, but said nothing. He began the class. "Focus," he commanded. "When you lose respect, you lose your strength." His words hit harder than his strikes. A few students glanced guiltily at the man, but their pride didn't let them feel shame for long. The lesson continued. Punches, blocks, breathing drills. The sound of feet slapping the floor echoed in rhythm. Yet the stranger's gaze never wavered. It was as if he was part of the rhythm itself. He wasn't just watching, he was remembering. During a short break, the students gathered by the water cooler. Their whispers grew louder. "Why's he staring like that? Creepy, right? Maybe he's a failed fighter or something." More like failed at life. Laughter filled the air again, sharp, mean, and loud enough for him to hear. The man looked down at his rough hands. For a moment he rubbed his palms together, slow and steady, as if he were trying to warm something deep inside himself. There was sadness in his eyes, but not defeat. He had heard these voices before, in the streets, in shelters, in life. Words had lost their power to hurt him long ago. When the break ended, Master Kenji demonstrated a new move, a powerful roundhouse kick. "Precision, not speed," he said. "The body moves with purpose. Every motion must mean something." As he moved, the man in the corner nodded slightly, like he already knew this truth. His posture, his breath, even his stillness carried discipline, the kind that comes from years of training and hardship. At the end of class, Master Kenji clapped once again. "Good work. Remember, respect is not given, it's earned." The students bowed. The man didn't leave immediately. He stood up slowly, his old joints creaking, and walked closer to the mat. The students froze, unsure what he would do. "Excuse me," he said softly, his tone humble. "May I try something?" Everyone stared. One student snorted. "You try what?" "You'll break your bones before the board." A wave of laughter broke out, this time louder, harsher. Some students even clapped sarcastically. The man waited quietly until they finished laughing. He didn't look angry. He just stood there, patient, with that same gentle smile. Master Kenji looked at him for a long moment. He could sense something deeper, something that didn't match the man's ragged appearance. Finally he said, "You want to try? The mat is open, but no one gets hurt here. Understand?" The man bowed his head. "I understand." He took off his old coat and stepped onto the mat barefoot. His feet were rough and scarred. His body was thin but strong in a quiet way, the kind of strength that comes from endurance, not muscle. The room fell silent. Every laugh faded into curiosity. The man raised his hands slowly, breathing deeply. His body shifted. In a single breath, his posture changed. His back straightened, his stance widened, his eyes sharpened. Suddenly, he didn't look like a homeless man anymore. He looked like a fighter. Master Kenji's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Interesting," he murmured. The man moved gracefully, almost like a dancer performing a simple kata. Step, block, strike, breathe. His hands cut through the air with control, his movements smooth and precise. The students stared open-mouthed. It lasted less than a minute, but when he finished, the silence was heavy. The same people who had laughed now didn't know what to say. The man bowed politely. "Thank you," he said. "It's been a long time." No one clapped. No one dared to. They just watched him step off the mat, put on his coat, and head toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back once more and smiled faintly. "You're all strong," he said. "But strength without heart is like a punch without purpose." Then he walked out into the night again, leaving the dojo in complete silence. Master Kenji stood still, lost in thought. He realized that in all his years of teaching, he had never seen such balance, such quiet power. That night, no one laughed on the way home. The joke had disappeared, and in its place grew something none of them wanted to admit: respect. But deep inside, every student knew one thing for sure: that man wasn't done yet. Something inside him was waking up, and soon, the whole dojo, maybe even the whole town, would see who he really was. The next evening, the dojo buzzed with nervous excitement. Nobody said it out loud, but every student was thinking the same thing. Would he come back again? Some hoped he wouldn't. Others secretly wanted to see him try something new. Even those who mocked him before now whispered quietly, curious and uneasy. Master Kenji entered the dojo, his face calm as always. "Line up," he ordered. The students bowed and began their warm-ups. But the air was different tonight. Every sound and every breath, every movement carried tension. And then, just like before, the wooden door opened. The man stepped inside, coat folded over one arm, a faint smile on his face. His shoes were still broken, his clothes still worn, but his eyes, they looked alive. The same gentle fire burned behind them. He bowed slightly. "Good evening again," the whispers began immediately. "He's back. What's he planning? Maybe he wants to show off again." The man ignored them. He placed his coat on the same bench and sat quietly, cross-legged, watching the students move. But this time there was something different in the way he watched, like someone who was waiting for a chance. Halfway through class, Master Kenji demonstrated a difficult technique, a spinning back kick meant to strike a hanging bag in motion. Even his advanced students struggled to control it. A few fell, some missed. The master corrected them patiently, though his eyes drifted once toward the stranger at the back. The man's lips moved quietly, as if counting, as if his body remembered the timing. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of class, the students sighed in relief. They bowed to the master, laughing and stretching. The man remained still. His eyes were fixed on the stack of wooden boards near the wall. Then, in a quiet but clear voice, he said, "Sir, may I try something?" The words froze the room. Every student stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the dojo. Master Kenji raised an eyebrow. "Try to what?" The man stood up slowly, his movements careful but confident. "Just one strike," he said. "One chance." A few students snickered immediately. "Here we go again." "He's crazy. This is gonna be funny." One of the older boys smirked. "You think you can do what we can't? You're not trained, old man." The man didn't look at him. He simply said, "Sometimes training never leaves you. Even when life does." That single sentence made the dojo quiet again. Master Kenji hesitated. A teacher of discipline, he believed in respect, and something in the man's tone carried sincerity. After a moment, he nodded. "All right," he said slowly. "You may try. But remember, this is not a game." The man bowed. "I understand." He walked toward the stack of boards. The students gathered in a half-circle, whispering, some grinning, some watching in curiosity. The old wooden floor creaked under his steps. He placed his right hand gently over the first board, feeling the grain, the weight. He closed his eyes. For a moment, everything went silent. The laughter, the whispers, even the wind outside. It felt like time had stopped. He took a deep breath. His shoulders relaxed. His fingers curled into a fist, and then he struck. Crack! The The sound was so sharp it echoed through the entire dojo. The board split cleanly in half. Gasps filled the room, but the man didn't stop there. He reached for another. "Enough," said one of the students nervously, but Master Kenji raised his hand. "Let him continue." The man stacked 4 more boards, one on top of another. His knuckles were red, but his face remained calm, peaceful, almost meditative. He stepped back, took one breath, and then, bam! 5 boards shattered like glass. Pieces flew across the mat. The sound rang like thunder. No one laughed this time. No one moved. The man exhaled slowly, opening his hand. His skin was bleeding slightly, but he didn't seem to notice. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That felt good." He bowed deeply to Master Kenji, then turned to leave. For the first time, Master Kenji broke his strict silence. "Wait," he said firmly. "Who are you?" The man stopped but didn't turn around. "Just someone who lost his way," he said softly, "and found peace again. Here." Then he walked out, leaving behind stunned faces and shattered wood. The students stared at the broken boards, speechless. The same ones who mocked him now whispered in disbelief. "Did you see that? How is that possible? Even Sensei doesn't hit that clean." Master Kenji knelt beside the splintered pieces, running his fingers over the break. The cut was perfect, precise, not forced. That kind of power came only from years of training, discipline, and deep understanding. He looked toward the open door where the night air drifted in. "He's no beginner," he murmured. "No ordinary man." That night no one went home laughing. Some couldn't even sleep, replaying the scene in their minds, the calm, the silence, the strike. It wasn't just strength. It was control, humility, and something spiritual. And somewhere out in the cold, under the same moonlight, the man sat on a park bench, wrapping his bleeding knuckles in an old cloth. He smiled faintly to himself, not with pride, but with peace. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive again. He whispered into the night, "Once a warrior, always a warrior." And the wind carried his words as if the world itself had heard him. The next day, the dojo felt different. No one could stop talking about what had happened. The story of the homeless man's strike had spread across town faster than anyone expected. People who weren't even there claimed they saw it. Some said he broke 6 boards, others said 10. But those who were present knew the truth. It wasn't just strength that shocked them. It was how he did it. Calm, silent, controlled. When Master Kenji entered the dojo that evening, the students were already whispering, "Do you think he'll come again? I hope he does. I want to see that move again." It didn't even look human. Kenji didn't respond. He placed his bag down, tied his black belt, and said, "Line up." The students obeyed. But even as they trained, their eyes kept flicking toward the door. The sound of the creaking hinge had become something everyone waited for, a signal that the story wasn't over yet. And sure enough, it came. The door opened softly, and there he was. The same man, worn jacket, tired eyes, but something had changed. His step was lighter, his back straighter. He looked renewed. He bowed at the entrance. "Good evening." The room fell silent. Even the ones who mocked him before didn't laugh now. They just watched as he placed his coat aside and sat down quietly. Master Kenji met his eyes for a moment and gave a small nod. "You're welcome to observe again," he said. "Thank you," the man replied, smiling faintly. Training began as usual, punches, stances, forms. The rhythm of movement filled the dojo, but there was a strange energy in the air. The man's gaze followed every technique, every shift of the foot, every flick of the wrist. He wasn't just watching, he was analyzing. When the class reached its final exercise, one of the younger students, full of pride, shouted, "Sensei!" "Let him try again." A few others cheered in agreement. They wanted to see more, but some still doubted, thinking it might have been luck. Master Kenji looked at the man and asked, "Would you like to?" The man stood up slowly. "Only if you allow me," he said humbly. "Go ahead," Kenji replied. "Show them what you know." The man stepped onto the mat, barefoot once more. His feet made soft sounds on the polished wood. He stood still for a moment, head bowed slightly. The students expected him to start swinging his arms or showing off some wild move, but instead he closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply, and then something changed. His posture straightened. His chest rose. His shoulders squared perfectly. His arms lifted, not randomly but with a rhythm, a precision that seemed practiced for years. The air around him seemed to grow heavier, more focused. The dojo went silent. Every move he made was smooth and powerful, like a wave rolling through the ocean. His hands cut through the air with sharp precision. His feet shifted gracefully, his breathing deep and measured. He was performing a kata, a traditional form that even Master Kenji hadn't seen in years. Every strike, every turn, every breath followed a flow so natural it seemed like music. The students were mesmerized. When he finished, he stood perfectly still, eyes closed, palms open, breathing softly. The silence was so deep that even the sound of the heater humming in the corner felt distant. Then Master Kenji spoke, his voice low and calm. "That was not luck." The man opened his eyes and smiled gently. "No, sir," he said. "It was memory." Kenji stepped forward, curious now. "You've trained before, haven't you?" The man hesitated. His smile faded into something bittersweet. "Yes," he said softly. "Long ago. Before I lost everything." The students leaned in, listening quietly. He continued, "I used to teach. Not in a big place, just a small dojo much like this one. I taught kids discipline, respect, peace. But one day everything changed. I lost my wife, then my home, then my purpose. I stopped teaching, and I stopped fighting." His voice trembled slightly, but he steadied it with a breath. "But when I stepped in here the other night, something woke up inside me. Something I thought I'd buried." The students looked down, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Master Kenji bowed deeply, showing respect. The same respect one martial artist gives another who has walked the same path. "Then you are not a stranger," he said quietly. "You are one of us." The man looked surprised. "You would call me that?" "Yes," Kenji replied firmly. "Because true strength has nothing to do with where you sleep or what you wear. It's in your heart." A faint shimmer of tears appeared in the man's eyes. He bowed deeply in return, both hands pressed together. "Thank you, master," he whispered. From that moment, the students' view of him changed completely. No one saw a homeless man anymore. They saw a warrior, one who had been broken by life but still carried the soul of a teacher. Before leaving, he placed his hand gently on one of the training bags and said softly, "Maybe next time. I can teach something small if that's allowed." Master Kenji smiled. "We would be honored." That night after he left, the students gathered around the sensei. The younger ones asked, "Was he really a teacher?" Kenji nodded slowly. "He still is," he said, "because a true master never stops teaching, even when the world stops listening." Outside, the man walked alone under the streetlights. The wind was cold, but his heart was warm for the first time in years. He looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "Maybe I can start again." And for the first time in a long time, he smiled, not as a man without a home, but as a warrior rediscovering his purpose. Days passed, and the dojo was no longer the same. The air inside felt lighter, calmer, almost sacred. The students trained harder than before, but there was something new in their spirit: humility. The man everyone once mocked had become a quiet mystery, a living lesson in front of their eyes. No one dared to laugh now. Instead, they found themselves waiting for him every evening, hoping he'd return. And he did. He walked in one chilly evening, the same coat folded neatly in his arms, the same gentle smile on his face. The students greeted him respectfully this time, bowing their heads slightly. Even Master Kenji smiled and said, "Welcome back." The man bowed in return. "Thank you, sensei." Class began as usual, warm-ups, punches, kicks, breathing. But something was different that night. There was a heavy energy in the air, like something important was about to happen. The students could feel it. After an hour of training, Master Kenji stopped the class and turned toward the man. "You've been watching and guiding quietly these past few days," he said. "Your movements show great control and your spirit shows peace. But I want to know." He paused. "Do you still have your strength?" The room fell silent. The man looked at him, puzzled. "My strength?" "Yes," said Kenji. "Not just the strength of body, but the strength of heart. The strength to face challenge and fear without pride or anger." The man's eyes softened. "I've lost many things, sensei," he said quietly. "But not that," Kenji nodded. Then prove it. He pointed toward the center of the dojo where a stack of thick wooden boards rested on a stand. It was a test every student feared. The breaking challenge. The record was 5 boards. Only one student years ago had managed that. Most failed before reaching 3. It was a test not just of power but of focus, patience, and spirit. The students whispered among themselves, their voices filled with disbelief. He can't do that again, can he? Those boards are tougher than before. This is impossible. But the man stepped forward without hesitation. He didn't look afraid. He looked calm, like he'd been waiting for this moment. He removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and stood before the boards. His knuckles still carried faint scars from the last time. He placed his right hand gently over the top board, feeling its cold surface. Then he closed his eyes. The room went silent. Everyone could hear the sound of his slow breathing. In, out, steady and deep. His body seemed to align perfectly. His spine straight, his shoulders relaxed, his focus razor sharp. Master Kenji's voice broke the silence. Remember, he said softly, it's not about anger. It's about peace. Strike with purpose, not pride. The man nodded once. Then he stepped back slightly, inhaled one last deep breath, and struck. Crack. The first 3 boards split instantly, the sound echoing through the dojo. But he didn't stop. He adjusted his stance, eyes closed again, breathing steady. His body seemed to hum with quiet power. Then with one fluid motion, he struck again. Crack! All 5 boards shattered cleanly, not broken roughly, but sliced perfectly through the center as if they were made of paper. Gasps filled the room. The students jumped to their feet, their eyes wide. One whispered, he did it. Again. Another said, no one's ever done it like that. Master Kenji approached the man slowly, disbelief on his face. He bent down and examined the splintered boards. They weren't fake, they weren't weak. They were solid oak. The man's hand trembled slightly, blood trickling down from his knuckles, but his face remained calm, peaceful. Kenji looked up at him. How? He asked softly. The man smiled faintly. Because I wasn't fighting the wood, he said. I was fighting everything that ever broke me. The words struck everyone like lightning. The dojo was silent, not out of shock this time, but out of deep, unspoken respect. Every student could feel it. This was not just a man proving strength. This was a man reclaiming his soul. The man bowed deeply toward Master Kenji. Thank you, he said, for giving me a chance to remember who I was. Kenji returned the bow, his eyes misty. No, he replied. Thank you for reminding us what true strength looks like. The students, moved by what they saw, followed their master's example. One by one, they bowed deeply toward the man who had once been a stranger. A joke, a nobody. Now, he stood among them, respected, honored, reborn. As the students cleaned the floor and picked up the broken pieces of wood, the man sat quietly on the bench again, wrapping his hand with a piece of cloth. He stared at the splinters in silence and smiled. In that small dojo, surrounded by the warmth of people who had once laughed at him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. When he stepped out into the cold night later, the stars above seemed brighter, the air softer. He looked up and whispered, "Thank you, life, for letting me fight again." And for the first time in a long, long time, he didn't feel homeless anymore. That night, no one at the dojo could sleep easily. The sound of those boards breaking still echoed in their minds. That single, clean strike that felt like more than just power. It was something spiritual, something pure. By morning, the story had spread beyond the small karate class. People in town began whispering about the homeless man who shattered records. Some thought it was fake. Others didn't believe a man living on the streets could possess such control, such grace. But those who were there knew they had seen something real. When the next class began, the dojo was more crowded than usual. Even students from other schools came to see if the rumors were true. Master Kenji stood at the front, silent but proud. Then, just as expected, the door opened. He walked in. The same man, the same calm steps. But now the room welcomed him with quiet respect. No more laughter. No more whispers. Only bowed heads and waiting eyes. He smiled softly. "I didn't expect to see such a big crowd," he said. Kenji stepped forward. You've earned their respect, he said. And mine. The man bowed. I'm not here for respect, he said humbly. I just came to thank you for letting me feel human again. Those words touched every soul in the room. Master Kenji gestured for him to join at the front. Come, he said. Teach us something today. The man looked surprised. Me, teach? Yes, Kenji said firmly. You've shown us strength. Now show us wisdom. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He stepped onto the mat, standing before the students. The room grew quiet. His voice, though gentle, carried the weight of a lifetime. Karate, he began, is not about hitting. It's about healing. The students looked confused. Healing? He continued. When I was younger, I used to teach children, kids who were angry, lost, and alone. I thought if I made them strong, the world wouldn't hurt them. But I was wrong. Strength without peace only builds walls. His eyes softened, and for the first time he spoke of his past. I had a dojo once, he said quietly, back in another town. It wasn't big, but it was my world. My wife used to help me. She'd greet every student with tea, remind them to smile after every bow. She believed kindness was the first lesson of every fight. He smiled faintly at the memory, but his eyes shimmered with pain. One winter, we lost our home in a fire. She didn't make it out. The room went utterly silent. Even the sound of breathing felt too loud. I tried to rebuild, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But grief broke me harder than any board ever could. I stopped teaching, stopped training, stopped caring. I lost everything, my dojo, my students, myself. He looked down at his calloused hands. I spent years walking the streets looking for something that felt like home. Then one night I heard the sound of kicks, shouts, and discipline. I followed it and found this place. Master Kenji's eyes softened. Fate, he whispered. The man nodded. Maybe. But when I first came in here, I saw laughter, not of joy but of judgment. It hurt, but I didn't blame anyone. I remembered that once I too had judged people by what they looked like, not by what they carried inside. He paused, looking at the students one by one. But then your sensei gave me a chance, and that's all a broken man ever really needs. A single chance to remember who he is. The students' eyes glistened with emotion. Some felt shame for their earlier cruelty. Others felt inspired. Master Kenji bowed deeply before him. You have taught us something no book or belt ever could, he said softly. You've reminded us that strength without compassion is weakness in disguise. The man smiled faintly. And you've reminded me, he said, that even the broken can find purpose again. Then one of the youngest students, barely 10 years old, stepped forward nervously. Sir, he said, are you going to stay with us? The man knelt down, smiling warmly. If your sensei allows it, he said. Kenji placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need my permission, he said. This dojo is your home now. The students clapped softly, bowing together. Tears filled many eyes, including the man's. He had entered that place as a stranger, homeless, hopeless, invisible. But now he stood in the center of the room, surrounded by warmth and respect. For the first time in years, he wasn't just existing. He was living. That evening, when everyone left, Master Kenji found him cleaning the floor, sweeping quietly. You don't have to do that, Kenji said. The man smiled. I know, but I want to. When I clean this floor, it feels like I'm cleaning the dust off my soul. Kenji stood there for a long moment, then bowed deeply. You honor this place, he said. The man looked up, his eyes gentle. No, sensei, he said softly. This place honored me. And in that quiet, candle-lit dojo, with the faint scent of sweat, wood, and peace, a once broken man finally found his home again. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a teacher reborn. Morning light spilled through the paper windows of the dojo, painting golden shapes on the floorboards. The place felt alive in a new way. The air was warmer, the students more focused, and laughter, the kind that came from joy, not mockery, filled the room again. At the center stood the man who had once walked in with torn clothes and tired eyes. Now he stood straight and strong, wearing a borrowed white jai that Master Kenji insisted he keep. It wasn't new, but it fit him perfectly, not just on his body, but on his soul. That morning, Kenji called the students together. From today, he said proudly, our friend will be assisting me. You will listen to him as you listen to me. The students clapped, bowing in respect. Some of them smiled shyly, others looked nervous. but all of them meant it. The man bowed deeply. "Thank you," he said softly. "But I am no master. I'm just someone who has fallen and stood up again." Kenji smiled. "That's exactly why you're the right one to teach." From that day onward, the man began helping during lessons. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. His words weren't grand, they were simple, honest, and full of truth. "Don't fight the air," he told a student struggling with form. "Listen to it, feel it. Even the wind teaches you balance." When another student grew angry after missing a strike, he said gently, "Anger blinds your spirit. A punch from rage may land fast, but it never lands true." Slowly, the students began to change. Their movements grew smoother, their hearts calmer. They stopped comparing themselves to each other. They stopped trying to impress. They started to feel. Even Master Kenji found himself learning from him. The two often stayed late after class, practicing in silence. One evening, after a particularly long session, Kenji turned to him and said, "You have a gift. You teach not with power, but with peace." The man chuckled softly. Maybe peace was all I was ever looking for. Outside the dojo, his life also began to change. Kenji arranged for him to stay in the small room behind the training hall, the one once used for storage. The man cleaned it himself, fixing the broken window and scrubbing the dusty floor until it shone. He placed his few belongings neatly in one corner, an old blanket, a cup, and a small framed photo of his late wife, which he had kept hidden all these years. He placed the photo on the windowsill and whispered, "I'm back, my love. I'm finally back." Every morning he woke before dawn to sweep the dojo, light incense, and meditate in silence before anyone arrived. The students who came early sometimes found him sitting perfectly still, breathing slowly, eyes closed, like a statue carved by peace itself. To them, he became more than just a teacher. He was a symbol, proof that no matter how broken a person's life becomes, the soul can still rebuild itself. One evening, a new student joined the dojo. A teenage boy with messy hair and angry eyes. He had been expelled from school, constantly fighting, lost and furious at the world. Master Kenji introduced him to the man. "He'll be your guide," he said. The boy laughed bitterly. "A homeless teacher, really?" The man didn't react. He smiled gently and said, "That's good. Keep that fire, but learn to control where it burns." For weeks the boy resisted. He mocked the lessons, refused to bow, and even stormed out once. But the man never raised his voice, never got angry. He simply said, "I'll be here when you're ready." One night the boy returned. His eyes were red. "I'm ready," he whispered. From that day forward, the boy trained harder than anyone. And when he finally broke his first board, the man didn't cheer or clap. He simply said, "Good. Now go find what you want to build with that strength." The boy smiled for the first time in years. Word spread about the dojo. Not for its trophies, not for its fights, but for its peace. Parents brought their children. Old students returned. Even the townspeople who once laughed now came to watch in quiet admiration. And at the heart of it all stood the man, once broken, now whole, teaching not with words but with the quiet strength of someone who had lived through pain and turned it into purpose. One evening, after all the students had gone, Master Kenji stood beside him at the doorway. The sunset painted their faces gold. "You've given this place new life," Kenji said. "You've given me new life." The man smiled faintly. "You gave me a chance when no one else did. All I did was remember who I was." Kenji placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," he said. "You reminded us who we should be." The man looked out at the fading sun, his heart light and full. For the first time in many years, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was living a new chapter. One born not from strength, but from forgiveness. And as the evening breeze moved gently through the open door, he whispered to himself, "Maybe redemption isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you share."